Great. I can see that there are a few people joining us. So welcome to this SEEBS webinar. My name is Georgina and I am the Alumni and Partnerships Manager for Europe, working here out of our SEEBS Zurich campus. So thanks for joining us today, wherever you are in the world. I just want to point out, if you want to ask questions during the session, you can use the Q&A box at the bottom of the screen. And we'll try and get through as many questions as possible in the second half of the session. Now, I think it's probably safe to say that most people joining us today remember the advent of the internet and probably remember how static and how passive that internet was. And I think at that time, we never could have really imagined an internet like it is today, where we order our shopping, we communicate with others, we create content, we even attend webinars like this one online. But today we're here to talk about what's next for the internet and to talk specifically about Web3, which is a new iteration of the internet that includes concepts such as decentralized finance, DAOs, and blockchain technology, and so on. So it's not me who's going to introduce you to this fascinating topic. It's our guest for today, who is Ben Hosel of the For the Win DAO. So without further ado, I'll hand over to Ben. Thank you so much for joining us today, Ben. Delighted to have you here.
Thank you very much. Thanks for having me here today. I'm really excited to talk today about one of my favorite topics. Before I go into the presentation, just a little bit about background about myself. So originally I'm from Germany. Until last year, I was, you could say, like a traditional banker. I worked more than 10 years in banking at Deutsche Bank in corporate strategy, at UBS in Zurich and in New York, always at the intersection between strategy and client experience. And last year, I jumped into the Web3 rabbit hole. So basically, I quit my job. I started For the Win DAO, or for FTW DAO, with my co-founder Isla Munro. Since then, we are working on For the Win, where we want to build the future of venture capital. For the Win DAO is a venture DAO where we try to find, fund, and foster diverse founding teams globally. And in this presentation today, I want to give you like a short introduction into Web3. The entire perspective, what I want to share here is like, as somebody who worked in traditional finance for more than 10 years, jumping into Web3 and really looking at different use cases, technology. I don't want to go into speculation and tokens and all of that. I just want to share my insights, my perspective as somebody who looks at Web3, and I want to talk about the potential, what I see or what we see in Web3. And that's what I prepared here today. So here you see the agenda. So I want to start with what is actually Web3, so something like a definition of Web3. Then I want to share some light onto how is it used actually today, what are different use cases, and I picked 3. What I want to share there with you, and then also like a little bit like an outline in terms of where does that go into the future. And also I want to give some practical next steps as somebody who's working in traditional finance or in any other traditional industry and who heard about Web3 or NFTs, and what are really tangible next steps, what you could do to expose yourself to this topic, because I think personally it's a fascinating topic. So with further ado, I would jump into the presentation. Oh, I forgot completely. Before I go into the presentation, for me, what is really important to stress here, it's a social webinar. I share my personal perspectives here. It's no financial advice at all. And everything what I say here is my personal opinion. So that's the only thing what I want to make clear here. So what is Web3? When you look at the public discussions, which is right now going on, probably all of you read Financial Times, Economist, you read a lot about Bitcoin and Ethereum and the market developments. And I just picked some screenshot from yesterday here where you see like the current market development. So it's really grim, but I think it's also in line with the larger financial market. And of course, there is all of that. And on the right side, what you see there is like, what I found a really funny meme is, of course, there are a lot of people now criticizing blockchain and the speculation. And of course, that's true. There's a lot of speculation in it. But personally, what I really want to stress here is I don't want to talk about speculation. What I want to stress here is like there's a lot of potential from a technological point of view, but also from a societal point of view in Web3. And I think that will last. And definitely, I'm 100% convinced that Web3 will have a lasting impact on all of our lives, and it will change a lot. And right now, we are really early. You see the advent of these technological changes, and I just want that everybody keeps an open mind on that. And just to strengthen this point or this opinion, I really recommend everybody, maybe some of you know this video, but I would recommend everybody to watch this video. It's from 1995, where basically Bill Gates explains the internet. And it's really interesting to see with our knowledge right now, how he talks about the internet and actually what the responses are, because it's really at that point in time, the internet was starting, and Georgina basically already touched base on that. The technology was not so far developed. All of the use cases, what we are used to right now, they were maybe like fantasies of some people, but they're actually materialized. And when we talk about Web3, that's really important for me, is like we have to basically look at Web3 in a similar way. Sometimes for me, it feels like Web3 right now is how the internet probably like was in the 2000s, where everybody was discussing, do I need an email account, for example? Do I need emails? And that's a similar discussion what we have right now in Web3. So really, really important when you read articles about Web3, could be Bitcoin, NFTs, DAOs, all of that. There's a lot of noise in it. And really, I would encourage everybody to look through the noise and really look at the potential, what is there. And because I'm convinced that there will be a lasting impact on that. So definitely recommend to watch that video, because it's on the one side, it's really interesting, but it's also like some food for thought, how you look at new things right now. But coming to Web3, what is Web3? If we look at the evolution of the internet, Web3, the name comes from, it's in some way the third iteration of the internet. So we started with Web 1.0. So basically there it was like just read-only information. You had websites, they were static. You could access this information, but it was only read-only. Then in the 2000s, basically Web 2 evolved, and there it was more participative. So basically there were these platforms like YouTube, for example, or other platforms where suddenly like creators could create content. So they could read, or like you could read information, but then you could also like produce content there. And that's actually the situation where we are living in right now. So you have all these huge platforms, they are owned by these corporations, and there on these platforms, you can access and consume information, and you also can create it. When you look at Web3, the difference is that there basically everything what is produced is decentralized. What that means is it's owned by the content creators, for example. There's no YouTube owning the content what you're producing. It's actually everybody who's participating on these different protocols, they are owning it jointly together. So there's no intermediary anymore, because everybody who is interacting with the protocols or the platforms, they're owning actually the platform. So it's in some way you could say like a collective ownership, and that's actually then the new aspect of Web3, and that's why it's always called Web3. It's like the evolution from Web 1 to 2 to 3 ultimately. And Web3, it's a term what is used. You could also, Web3 is powered by blockchain. When people think about Web3, often they also think about cryptocurrencies. Cryptocurrencies is also like a piece of Web3. So Web3 is really like a big category, and under that you have DeFi, decentralized finance, you have DAOs, you have NFTs, you have cryptocurrencies, tokens, all of that. So in some way, Web3 is like the big category of how you should think about this evolution. It's also like this, the really strong point about Web3 is that it's based on decentralized networks. Everybody is like owning what is going on there. And the interesting piece is, in contrast to Web 2, actually the new thing is we can trust each other on a mass scale, because in Web 2, what we needed these platforms who are in between as intermediaries, who basically ensured that everybody who's interacting there can trust each other. But with blockchain technology and the smart contracts in place, basically these intermediaries can be made obsolete, and then basically all the interactions what are happening can be peer-to-peer, and we still can trust everybody, because everybody has to adhere to the same rules, because the rules are encoded into smart contracts. So in some way you could say you're going from don't be evil to can't be evil, because the smart contracts based on blockchain technology, they don't allow you to be evil. if you do a step back.
Sorry to interrupt your flow. Would it be possible for you to just make your screen large again, how it was before? Because it's a little bit small. I think it's the view of the slides, actually. So if you do end slideshow and then project it how you did before. Yeah, that's much better. Perfect. Sorry. Thank you. Sorry to interrupt you.
Sorry. So if you do a step back and look at the benefits of Web3, Web3 has the potential to make societies fairer and more efficient by removing these intermediaries, what I mentioned before, these platforms, and returning this value directly to the users, the content creators and suppliers, because in some way, these platforms where the interaction would be happening would be co-owned by the people who are interacting on that. Also, a really important point in Web3 is that basically you own your own data and the digital footprints, not like now where data is collected by all websites on what you're doing in the internet. In Web3, you have the ownership around your data. You have the power to say where you actually like release your data, what other suppliers or platforms basically get from your data. So it's from a privacy and security point of view much stronger than Web2 what we have. And the really interesting point for me, what I really like, where I see the potential there is, it has the potential for us as people to organize ourselves, and you have that already in Web2 and on platforms like Facebook groups or so. But it also gives you the opportunity to organize your capital and in a collective way on a global level as well. And from that, basically, there are so many different use cases what can sprung off. And if you think about what is then if you see the benefits and then what is the impact, there's really like, you can imagine that the impact will be that many organizations or topics or projects will be co-owned by people. And co-ownership means then that there will be also like governance of these people. So you will see more and more businesses or projects which will be co-owned and co-governed by people who are interacting in Web3 on the direction of these businesses. You will also see that there will be a huge growth in terms of transaction in digital coins, and not only like Bitcoin or Ethereum. You see that also like with regulators around the globe, that they are working on digital versions of their different currencies. So digital Swiss francs, digital yuans, digital euros, all of that is coming. And in some way that's enabled by Web3 technology, and regulators looking at that, and they're also implementing it. And of course we have online banking already, but when it comes to this tokens, this digital currencies, it's much faster, it's much more efficient. And that will also have a lasting impact on how we do payments in the internet, how we do payments in the in the real world. And then probably some of you already saw or read articles about NFTs, and a lot of fashion companies in particular, they started on producing NFTs. So Adidas and Nike are really good examples of that. What you see there, they are creating NFTs, for example, digital collectibles of sneakers, for example, or digital fashions. And what you will see there is blockchain technology or Web3 technology will also enable this huge category of digital collectibles. So, and it will be digital fashion, it will be digital land, for example. We'll go a little bit more into detail into that, but you will see much more digital ownership, because that's what Web3 is also like enabling. In the next section, what I want to do a little bit is like make it a little bit more tangible. What are right now use cases, what you can see in Web3? And there, the three use cases, what probably like also most common and probably you heard about, decentralized finance, NFTs or non-fungible tokens, and decentralized autonomous organizations. So these are the three use cases I want to go a little bit deeper, so that you get a little bit like a deeper understanding of what these use cases actually mean and what the potential is in there. So when we go to DeFi, and that's for me, for example, really interesting as a former banker. In traditional finance, what you have there is always between the actors, you always have banks in between as intermediaries. These intermediaries are offering services and products. And the most simple way, for example, is like you have people who want to invest money and you have people who need a loan, for example, and the bank steps in between and offers that service to do the matching, and then basically it takes in the investments from the person and it gives it out as a loan. And that's what the task of the intermediary is. In decentralized finance, what you can see there, it's peer-to-peer organization. So you have protocols which take over the function of the bank and make it a peer-to-peer interaction. So you see that in DeFi, and that people can interact with each other. People lend out the money or give it as a loan, and then people can receive that. So DeFi in general is taking over more and more products and services of traditional banks, and lending and borrowing is one example. You have a lot of decentralized exchanges where people can exchange right now tokens. So swapping, for example, Ethereum to Bitcoin. You don't need a bank in between. It's just like a smart contract protocol where people interact directly with the smart contract and can swap their tokens. And that's, for example, a use case what you can see also for these official currencies, which are then coming like euros and US dollars. That you have decentralized exchanges, which are only like a protocol, a smart contract where people can interact with each other directly. You also have asset custody, for example, where you can hold your digital assets. There are, for example, Knossos safes. It's a solution where you have where you can pool your digital currencies and then have, like, for example, multiple signatories on a Knossos safe, and then they can release, if they have consensus, their funds. You also have like a plugin or different plugins for your wallet or for your browser, where you can store your Ethereum, for example, or Bitcoin, and then can use it to interact with different websites. You also have what you see there, and that's like a large growth, or at least like in 2021, it was a large growth sector. It was derivatives. So you had a huge amount of projects and protocols which developed derivatives for the crypto space, and there were no banks involved. And then you have, of course, payments, for example, what you see in Web3. Then when people are working in Web3, they are often taking their salary, for example, in Ethereum. So you also see these payments, and it could be, for example, salary payments, which are then used or which are denominated in cryptocurrencies. So there's like a huge industry which is evolving. It's extremely, the variety is huge. It's really interesting to see. But overall, the direction is that this space is really directly attacking the business models of traditional banks. And from my experience and what I see there, I see that some of these protocols will definitely take over some of the business models of banks. And that's really interesting to see because it's innovation. And from my point of view, it's much more efficient and much more effective when you look at these DeFi solutions. The next use case, what I want to shed some light on is our NFTs. Probably everybody of you read about some of the NFT projects. The most famous is the Bored Ape Yacht Club, for example, what you see here in the middle. NFTs, it's a technology, basically. It's a token which you can hold in your digital wallet, for example. And it's some people say it's like just a JPEG, but it's even more than a JPEG. The token is actually proving that you own this digital copy, for example. And there are different types of NFTs. There are profile pictures. The Bored Apes, for example, they are profile pictures. In some way, their value stems from social signaling, because these profile pictures have a certain value, and they're in high demand. And so if you have that as a profile picture on your Twitter account or your Instagram account, that has some social signaling. And all of these companies like Instagram and Twitter, they're already like integrating solutions that only you, if you the real owner of this NFT, can use it as a profile picture. You have also like art and music NFTs. For example, artists started to create digital art and then minted it as an NFT. So basically you can buy this digital art then, and by minting it as an NFT, you can ensure that you are actually the owner of this digital art and nobody else. If somebody else is, for example, taking a screenshot, they never can prove that they own it. But with NFTs, basically, you always can own it. Gaming is also really interesting area in the NFT space. For example, there are certain games where what I really like is it's a racing game where your NFT, for example, is your racing car. So the racing car you have as an NFT, you buy it, you can also upgrade it. And when you want to play the game, basically you have to use your NFT to log into the game, and then you can drive the game there. So you have these gaming NFTs, which are also coming. Then there's this big category of utility, and utility is like, for example, the most common utility aspect here is membership. So you can use NFTs as a membership card. So you have an NFT, for example, in your digital wallet, which proves that you are like a member of a certain club. And then when you want to enter the club or the community, you use this NFT basically to interact and open up the community for you. And that's like only one example where you see like utility. And then the last one, which I want to shed some light, is like virtual lands and worlds. So there, probably some of you remember like Second World, which was like a digital world ecosystems 10 years ago or so. So this entire space actually evolved, and what you have now, you have these different metaverses, which are worlds where you can buy your real estate, and then you can build anything what you want on these plots of real estate. And there are different metaverses right now, which are evolving, and all of these different lands have different values. But ultimately, underlying all of these, this diversity of different metaverses is that the perception is that our life will be more and more in the digital space, and it will evolve with more interaction. And if we want to have these deeper interactions, it needs to be a little bit like replicating what we have in the real world. So it will be something like a metaverse. And if you want to build a house there, for example, you need a plot where you can build it, and then basically you have your fantasy, and you can build what you want there. And that's NFT. So it's a huge area. The use cases are slowly evolving. The most prominent are the profile pictures, because that's always in the news. I think there were articles in Forbes magazine and Financial Times and all of that. But what you see on an overall, like on an industry level, is that in particular fashion labels, they are jumping onto NFTs. So Adidas issued like NFTs, Nike, Louis Vuitton issued this game. So they see it as these NFTs as a marketing and branding opportunity, where they can use these NFTs to first create a community, but then also like facilitate engagement in the digital space. So it's definitely something what you should look out and research a little bit more, because it's really fascinating and it's interesting. And as I said before, there are so many different aspects and areas when it comes, for example, to metaverses. It's really interesting. And what we have to see is like, what are the use cases which are like surviving and which are coming through? And then also like from a metaverse perspective, what are the metaverses which will be there in 5 or 10 years? And because that's still a little bit unclear. And the second topic, what I want to talk about, and that's really like closest to my heart, because that's for the when we are building a DAO, are DAOs. So DAOs, in short, are a new way, you could say like a new way of organizing in the internet. So in some way, you could think about it as a digital Switzerland. It's in contrast to a traditional company, which is like hierarchically organized, a DAO is more fluid. And it's more bottom up, because it's more like a collective. So basically everybody who is in a DAO, they co-own the entire organization. Decision-making in these DAOs are always done via consensus. So basically there's a voting procedure on large strategic topics. And then every DAO has also to find a way to be efficient in the decision-making. So some DAOs, for example, they integrate delegation when it comes to voting, but overall, the beauty of DAOs is if you're part of a DAO, you have a say there when it comes to the direction of the DAO. So it's looser, it's bottom up, it's more transparent, because the decision-making process is always really open. Because normally like everybody who has an idea what the DAO could do or the organization could do can write a proposal, for example, put it into the forum or the platform, what they're using for interacting. And then there's often a vote upon that. So everybody can influence the direction of the DAO. And when you look at the DAOs which are out there right now, all of them are fully global, because they're internet native organization, and they're completely different to hierarchical organizations like companies. So, and what you see in the DAO space is that since the pandemic, and I think many people of you read these articles around the big resignation that people in normal traditional office jobs, that they are in some way resignating because they don't feel anymore inspired by these big corporations. They flock into DAOs because there they have the feeling that they have a say in the organization, in the direction of the organization, and that they also can change something. So that's really what I find really interesting, and that's what I think you can see also in the growth of these DAOs. So on the left side, what you see there is the treasury. It's until April, so it's not yet reflecting the latest market developments, but it's really interesting to see how these DAOs, these organizations grew extremely over the last year. So some of these DAOs, they have like $1 billion treasury, which they can decide upon where to use it. There are certain DAOs, or on the right side, you see like different DAOs with different specific focuses. So you have DAOs which are focusing on building the operating or the infrastructure for these DAOs. You have investment DAOs. So these are clubs, for example, people come together, they pool their assets, and then they vote upon where to invest. So one of the most prominent examples there is the LAO. It's a Delaware-based community where they invest into Web3 projects. They pool their assets, they have a voting process in place. And then if the majority is voting, for example, to invest in a startup or a protocol, they're investing into that. There are DAOs, for example, who collected money or funds, and basically they're handing out these funds as grants. So everybody who wants to implement a project, which is, for example, like benefiting the greater good, they can apply for these grants. And then these DAOs are handing out these grants. You have collector DAOs. These are similar to investment DAOs. So these collector DAOs are collecting, for example, NFTs. They pool their assets again. They invest into these NFTs. You have protocol DAOs. These are these DeFi DAOs, what I mentioned. For example, Uniswap, what you see there, it's a protocol which is co-owned. So everybody who owns these tokens, they can vote upon the direction of the organization. And Uniswap is one of these decentralized exchanges, for example. You have service DAOs, social DAOs, and also media DAOs, where, for example, the entire organization or the DAO is producing media content around different topics. So one really great example there is Bankless DAO, where the folks basically produce content around Web3. They're also building some really cool tools which are helping the rest of the ecosystem. So and that's really, for me, really one important point here is what you take away is that the DAO space it grew extremely over the last year, and it's really fascinating to see how these people organize, because it's really their democratic decision making in these organizations, and there's a lot of talent flocking from Web2, but also more traditional organizations going into these spaces, and they really feel welcomed there. It's really interesting to see the creativity in these spaces and how these DAOs evolve. Of course, there are also challenges, because a fully democratized decision making in these large organizations with large treasuries has also their challenges. So in all of these DAOs, I think they struggle with the same things. How can you make efficient decision making while also having incorporating everybody's opinion? But overall, what I personally see in these DAOs, it's really fascinating that everybody feels much more motivated than in traditional organizations, and that many people who are in there come from traditional jobs like consulting, investment banking, and also engineering jobs. Maybe for the last chapter, what I want to do here is where to go next, because I talked about what is Web3, I talked about what are the different use cases. So what is the future there? And for the future, it's not clear where to go, what will be the protocol, or what will be the use cases which really like kick everything off to mass adoption. But what I really find interesting when you look at Web3 and the adoption rate and compare to the internet, and that's what you see on the left side, you see a similar development. So Web3 in some ways developing on a same trajectory as the internet in the 90s. That's really promising, and it's still really early when you look at the users. For example, in Web3 and in particular Ethereum users, you have around 7 to 50 million. It's an estimated figure, so it's like on a global scale, it's still extremely small. But there's a lot of potential. But for Web3, because it's so early, there are also a lot of challenges. And one of the big challenges which need to be solved in order to really get into mass adoption rate is regulation. So there are some opinions in the Web3 space where they say there shouldn't be any regulation, but my personal opinion on that is in order to achieve mass adoption, there needs to be regulation. And from that point of view, it's really interesting to see, for example, Switzerland, because Switzerland, some years ago, they implemented already like a legal and regulatory framework for Web3. So in some way, it gave projects and protocols a lot of clarity on how to act in the current legal framework. And it's also really a positive legal framework. So it's not inhibiting in any innovation in the space. And that's really interesting. So I think regulation will come for sure, in particular with the latest developments over the last weeks, where you had a huge market turndown and then a lot of retail investors suffered. So definitely there's some regulation required. Personally, I think, however, there needs to be a balance in terms of the regulation. It needs to be regulation to ensure that retail investors are protected, but on the other side, it should also like offer enough room for innovation, because Web3 offers so many potential, and the regulatory framework needs to ensure that this is still possible. On the second point, what I want to make there is, because it's so early, the user experience is often really clunky. So when you come from the fully developed Web 2 and go into Web 3, it's not as easy as you think. The user experience is often really difficult. It's cumbersome, and these digital wallets, what I mentioned before, for different tokens, sometimes you need different wallets. So you have to keep track of the different softwares what you're using there, and that's definitely I hope that will improve, and I'm convinced that it will improve, because you see already like a lot of protocols and projects jumping up on solving that. But in order to achieve mass adoption, to make Web3 a success, there needs to be significant improvements. And the third point is education. So when you talk to founders in the Web3 space, everybody will tell you education is key. Education in particular for onboarding, because I said before, user experience is really clunky, it's cumbersome. So in order to onboard more people right now in the current state, you have to do a lot of education. And that's why when you look at Web3 projects, every Web3 project is doing some kind of a education piece. And the last point, and that's maybe like the big picture then also on a macro level. So with the current economic situation, which is coming up, Web3 will definitely have it also tougher, like the rest of the economy. But the overall notion in Web3 is right now, with the current market developments and the prices going down so much, it's many people say it's a positive sign, because it takes out the speculation. It takes out projects and protocols which don't really have a business model, which were only propelled by speculation. And that's why a lot of people think the current bear market and market developments are actually better for Web3, because it helps builders to build instead of only hoping for speculation. So looking at the outlook for the next 12 and 18 months, but also like beyond, I think regulation will definitely come. User experience needs to be improved. Education is a key component, and this webinar is one piece of that. And then ultimately, if the crypto space or Web3 space is right now in the bear market, I think it's a good sign, because it will help overall the entire space. And maybe some 5 tangible next steps for you. So what I always recommend is, like, if you don't have it yet, you can maybe set up a Web3 wallet. Because you need a Web3 wallet to interact with Web3. So the most prominent is MetaMask, for example, or Coinbase. So there, it's a plugin normally for Chrome. You can install that, and then you can have your Ethereum in there. I think in MetaMask you can buy Ethereum directly. If you don't have it yet, or maybe you could think about creating an account on a centralized exchange to convert your fiat money into cryptocurrencies, because you need Ethereum to interact. Then there are a lot of free courses around in the space around Web3. One really what I like is Bankless Academy, for example, or Rabbit Hole. There you have like small modules on, for example, how to set up a Web3 wallet. And they have also advanced courses where they tell you how, for example, smart contracts work, different decentralized exchanges and all of that. So there are a lot of free online courses, and I definitely recommend that instead of any paid courses, because what is really interesting from a cultural point of view in Web3 is there's the sense of community. So many people who are in Web3, they are producing content in particular around education, which is for free. So there is no need for example, for a paid course on Web3. So definitely check out Bankless Academy and Rabbit Hole for that. And right now, and it is also, if you want to, for example, join a DAO, you need Discord. And I don't know about how many people here in this space use Discord before. Discord is a tool which comes out of the gaming scene. It's a little bit like Slack, you could say. It's a little bit, for somebody who never used it before, it could be a little bit overwhelming, but you definitely, in order to jump into these Web3 communities, you need to have Discord. So you need to install it and familiarize yourself a little bit with that, because these Web3 communities, they live mostly on Discord. And if you've done all these steps, what I definitely can recommend, just to get a better feeling of this entire space, is join a DAO. So you can go back to the overview of the different DAOs, what I had there. You can join any of these DAOs. Sometimes you have to buy a token in like with smaller amounts. Sometimes you don't have to do that. Just join these DAOs, join their Discord server, check them out, see the conversations which are going on there, and then start contribute there. Because all of these DAOs, they're always looking for people who want to contribute, and many of them make it really easy to contribute. So for example, some of them ask you to write an article, which is maybe like 1 hour, and then you get a compensation in tokens, or just like right there, check out the people, talk to the people, just to get a vibe, and then maybe like find out the DAO which you like the most. And maybe with these 5 steps, you could have like a really good jump into Web3 in terms of getting a feeling, getting your toes wet in some way, without really investing into the space. Because for me personally, Web3 is not only a technological and also financial innovation, it's also like a cultural innovation, because this culture in Web3 is really interesting to see. You have a lot of builders, you have the sense of community. So definitely, if you want to experience that to the fullest, you have to join a DAO. And with that, maybe Georgina, I hand it over back to you.
Oops. So thank you so much, Ben, and thank you for all the recommendations as well. We've got a couple of questions already. So I think towards the beginning of the presentation, you were talking about some use cases. We had a question from David. Are there any currently profitable B2B use cases?
For B2B use cases, honestly, I have to check that. I don't know about that, in particular the B2B use cases. What I can say, for example, for the use case of DAOs, one challenge what these DAOs have right now is like to create a recurring revenue base. So for example, media production or thought leadership production is not really like generating a lot of revenues. Some of these protocols, mostly of them in the DeFi space, they were able to generate recurring revenues. But many of these DAOs, they struggle with that. So that's definitely a point or a challenge for the entire space then when it comes to DAOs and recurring revenues.
Great, thank you. And actually, David has another question, which is, how does user registration work for a DAO? And how do you stop abuse where one person perhaps has thousands of registrations and tries to skew the voting in their favor?
Yeah, so on the registration piece is normally with a MetaMask wallet. So if you set up a MetaMask wallet, that's already like the first hurdle, because in order to interact with a DAO, for example, you also always have to have these MetaMask wallets. Of course, there could be people with different MetaMask wallets and then skewing the voting process. There are some projects focusing on to right now. One interesting project is KYC DAO, which are actually like looking into this this problem. So their ideas around, you have if you buy one of their KYC NFTs, you have to go through a traditional KYC process, you could say, and only when you check that, then basically you get issued like an NFT, which is proving you are that person for this from this organization. And then DAOs could use their service, for example, this service or this NFT, in order to ensure that there's nobody has like different accounts and then voting different times or multiple times. So basically skewing the results. So with this KYC solution, they are offering the service to DAOs that they can ensure that only real people voting there, and that they are not like have the opportunity to vote several times. But that's definitely like a point where also like DAOs are focusing on. But right now the registration process is normally like, if you want to join the community itself, it's like you have the Discord account, you join the Discord server. And then as soon as it gets to a more serious interaction where, for example, tokens are involved, you need to have these tokens in your MetaMask wallet.
Okay, thank you. And we've got another question on DAOs from Amika. So what stops the DAOs from replicating the challenges raised by the centralized authorities of today?
Yeah, that's a really good question. And also some kind of my observation, what when I quit my job last year and I joined several different DAOs and looked at the conversations going on there, sometimes it felt that many of these DAOs are just replicating corporate structures, you could say. It's maybe more like an evolutionary process there, that they start from scratch, and then basically when it's about budget, they're evolving, and then at a certain point in time they realize that there needs to be a budget meeting. So definitely that's a challenge what is there. But more and more DAOs are figuring out the way to balance on the one side what are structures and procedures which are proven in corporate world and which are good, which you need in order to operate in a professional way, and how can you still keep this open and democratic culture and having this co-ownership. So, and that's in some way like a balance. And definitely there are DAOs which are just replicating corporate structures in a way, and then it's not really like a DAO, but there are more and more DAOs which figure out this issue of what do you need to be able to operate professionally on the one side, and having this creative spirit, which basically is the strength of a DAO, and this inspiration what you had there.
Great, thank you. And another question on DAOs: are there any recommendations on any good DAOs tackling sustainability themes, either investing in sustainability or thought leadership?
On sustainability, I have to check that. I can add it to the slide set what we share after this webinar. But right now I have to check that, because I don't want to recommend something which I didn't check. I have some names in my mind.
Time to research it.
Yeah, exactly.
Of course, no problem. Yeah, we can share that one. We'll share the slides after the session as well, so we can add some info on that for you, David. And another question, in understanding what comes next, are we not assuming that the way humans interact would be exactly replicated in the digital domain? I say this with the understanding that changes were made to how we interact to move from Web 1 to Web 2. It's quite a philosophical question, that one.
Yeah, and I think that's also the one of the interesting, but also at the same time challenging aspects in Web3. So in some way, everything is digital in Web3 and the interactions are there. And when you look at the metaverse, for example, is that something what we want as a society? Do we want to just replicate the life what we have in real life now into a digital space? And do we want to organize it exactly in the same way? And my feeling on that is there's not yet a consensus on that. So of course, because it's the easiest, that's what people are doing. So when you look at these metaverses, they are a replication of real life in a digital space. But I think the conversation on that is not yet finished. But because also what you see also coming up more and more are questions around what are legal liabilities, for example, in the metaverse. And in some way, I think that's a conversation which society will have. The internet is now like 30 years old or so, and it's more established. But I have the feeling the same conversations happened in this space, and it needs to be happening there as well. And so I think this entire conversation on what the metaverse should look like and will be for us, it's a conversation what we all have to have as a society. And also when you think about it more on a global level, is it that we will have like a global metaverse, which is then global, and will you have like besides that more regional ones or local ones? I think that's a conversation which is evolving, and it includes everybody, and it's not yet answered.
Great, thank you. And actually, I wanted to ask a question. Maybe you can speak about your experience, but in terms of the demographic of people who are kind of interested in joining DAOs, you mentioned a little bit that there were a few people from kind of corporate worlds and finance and so on. Do you find any other kind of common themes in those people who want to kind of enter this community?
Yeah, it's really interesting. So I would say like beginning mid of last year, DAOs were still a extreme topic of the fringe. So there were, you could say like mostly technological or people who have a technology background in it. Since mid or end of last year, it became more and more mainstream. my feeling is in the DAOs where I interact, for example, you have like in some way you have the entire society represented. It's really interesting. It went away from people with technological background to people with all backgrounds in some way. What I find really interesting is also because they are internet native, and it's in some way it's easier for people to join. So you could say like there are many more people who are maybe not working in the corporate world because of maybe their education or so, but these DAOs offer them opportunities to contribute on a global level for a bigger topic, for example. So I would say like in some of the DAOs where I'm interacting, I have the feeling it's even more diverse than what you have like in big corporations. So that's really interesting, but it's really right now, I would say it's hard to say or to identify a certain demographic across all DAOs. For sure, when you look in specific DAOs, for example, I have the feeling that you can say there's a clear demographic when you go back to the collectors NFTs, for example, the collector DAOs, DAOs which focus on collecting NFTs. I would say yes, there maybe you can see a demographic that it's maybe like younger age on average, without really knowing the data behind it. And maybe for DeFi protocols, you could argue it's more people with a technological background, but then of course there's marketing and all of that. Overall, I would say it's representing society and the diversity of society. And I would say like often it offers the opportunity for more people who are not in the big corporations, for example, it offers them an opportunity to contribute. And in particular, from a regional point of view, what is really interesting to see that in particular regions like Latin America and Africa, for example, you see a lot of people coming from these spaces, because ultimately what you need only to interact with these DAOs is an internet connection and a Discord account and a MetaMask wallet. So it's the barriers of entry are much lower than, for example, for big corporations to enter these spaces.
Great, thank you. And then another question, is it possible to have country metaverse and country DAO? So I think it means country-specific metaverse or country-specific DAOs.
Yeah. For the DAOs, I think the use case for them is endless. So in some way, you could see already that there's DAOs already like on a local level or a city level. Most of the DAOs right now, they are global. But what you see more and more, there's like a fragmentation in terms of DAOs because you have so many different purposes or potential purposes for DAOs, that more and more are coming up. I personally find it interesting. I'm originally from Germany. I'm mostly interacting in global DAOs, but what I see when I go back to Germany or like specifically look for that, there are also like focused DAOs, which are focused, for example, on the Web3 space in Berlin. So definitely you have these DAOs as well. But I think it's a global phenomena, and you have more and more regionalization of this concept. So it's really interesting from a phenomenon concept that it was born on a global level, and now it's trickling down to a regional and local level. That's for DAOs. For the metaverses, I'm not sure. Most of these metaverses, or all of them, what I know, they are global. To my knowledge, there's no local or regional metaverse until now.
Okay, good, thank you. Another question, are there any established DAOs for fundraising and investments in early stage startups that you know of?
Yeah, so for example, the DAO is a really good example. They are established since last year. In Bankless DAO, there's a venture DAO which are coming up, which focus on early stage or pre-seed and seed stage. For the Win DAO is also, we are building up a venture DAO. First of all, we build a social DAO where we want to bring together founders, investors, startup operators, and also like people who are interested in the topic, and then also like creating a venture DAO around that. So that's also like an opportunity. Also, I published an article with a friend of mine some weeks ago around investment DAOs. My opinion on most of the venture DAOs, what you see out right now is like most of them are focusing on pre-seed and seed stage investments, because it's the concept of a venture DAO is still pretty young and early, and there are many out there, but most of them, they are focusing on Web3 right now. So yeah, but if you're interested in that topic, for example, you can definitely contact me after that, because at For the Win we are actually building something like that.
Great, thank you. And yeah, and Ben will share his contact details at the end as well for anyone who might want to get in touch. Another question, if you want to answer this one, what do you have to say on Bill Gates's comment that NFTs are a sham?
Yeah, it's an interesting comment, because maybe he should remember how he was treated in 1995 when he was talking about the internet. I don't want to judge him on that. For me personally, what I say is I see the opportunity, but I also see the speculation in the space. But coming from traditional finance and seeing the opportunity, I think it's worthwhile investigating and pushing that forward. Can everybody say right now which will be the future and what will be prominent or like dominant in the next 10 years or so? Nobody can do that. But I think what you have to keep is an open mind. And for me personally, I think it's not a scam. It's not a scam. Definitely, there are projects which are scams, but on a technological point of view, I think it's not a scam. It has a lot of opportunity, and maybe he should watch this YouTube video again.
Thank you. That's great. Thanks, Ben. And another question is there a framework for the taxation of these entities yet?
That's an evolving space. So if the person who asked the question meant DAOs, that's an evolving space. So what you have there when it comes to taxation, or in particular legal and regulatory or regulation, in the US, you have Delaware and Wyoming, which are really established there. Wyoming and Colorado, they are leading the pack in terms of legislation for DAOs. They're also, I think, the most advanced when it comes to taxation. Overall, it's an open topic or a challenge. There are the attempts to find the right legal and taxation standpoint. The challenge, what you have there is like the DAOs. The first DAO was created in 2016. Then it was really quiet for a long time, and DAOs are a topic of 2021 and now 2022. So in some way, there's it's not yet fully regulated. When you look at Switzerland, there's guidance on how to it, but they are not specifically regulated from a taxation point of view. However, when you look at the German government, for example, they have a blockchain strategy in general from a industry support point of view, and they have DAOs on their radar there as well. So my feeling on that is right now it's a gray zone. Many DAOs try to follow the same path as, for example, limited liability companies are following when it comes to taxation and legal standards. I'm not sure whether that's will be the right way in the coming years, but my feeling is it comes back to what I said before. Regulation will come, and in some way, regulators need some time to implement the proper framework for that. Until then, I think it's a gray area. DAOs try to do their best to adhere to the taxation and legal requirements, so they follow this path of limited liability companies. However, the regulators need to give also more guidance on that, and that will come in the coming years.
Great, thank you. Yeah, and the question was on DAOs, and just a follow-up comment from the person who asked that question. He says that for DAOs, probably most of them are still loss-making, but this is probably not the aim at the moment. Would you say that's a fair comment?
Yeah, and that's coming back to what I mentioned before. It's like many DAOs are challenged with the recurring revenues to become profitable, for sure. Yeah, but when you look at the different approaches what DAOs take there, and there are a lot of discussions going around, there's one group which says, for example, DAOs shouldn't be legally incorporated in some way. So there's definitely this opinion, because the notion there is it's a digital native organization, so it's really difficult to tie it down to one specific jurisdiction. And then there's like a growing group of people who say in order to make these DAOs a thing and really make them happen, you need to tie them to the existing legal and regulatory framework. And that's where DAOs are incorporating, for example, in Switzerland or in Wyoming or Delaware or so. And yeah, maybe that's true still, that many of these DAOs are not profit or generating any profit, so it's not a big topic for them. But I'm 100% convinced that many of these DAOs will figure out that way how to create recurring revenues, and then it will be definitely a challenge. And that's where the regulator needs to come in and have like giving some guidance on that topic.
Great, thank you. I'm conscious of time. We have a few more minutes, so if anyone does have another question, we can probably answer one more. Or Ben, I don't know if you have anything that you'd like to add before you share your details, in case anyone wants to follow up with you.
No, I'm pretty happy that I had the opportunity here to share my insights as a former banker. I think for me, the key summary here is really like, it's an evolving space. The entire space is evolving. It has a lot of opportunity, but a lot of challenges. But what I find really personally really interesting and motivating is the creativity in the space, the expertise and the capability of the people in that space. So that's why I'm convinced that this space will make it beyond any economic developments over the next 12, 18 months or so.
Great, thank you so much, and yeah, thank you for joining us today and for explaining all of this to us. I'm sure that we could probably talk about this for the rest of the day, the rest of the week even.
Yeah.
But if people want to get in touch with you, they can reach out to you, correct?
Yeah, absolutely. So here I have my social, so I'm on LinkedIn, Twitter. If you want to have like a separate conversation, you also can, here's my Calendly link, so you can schedule there some time. I'm always happy to talk about DAOs, about my experiences, and in particular about For the Win, where we try to build a social DAO and a venture DAO. So please reach out if you have more questions or want to contribute, engage, or learn more about For the Win.
That's great. Thank you so much for joining us, Ben, and for everyone who's participated today and asked questions. Thank you so much. We hope to see you again at another one of our Seeds webinars, and we'll share the slides with you. And for anyone who joined a bit late in the session, we'll share the YouTube link as well, so you can watch the full thing back if you would like to. But for now, I'll leave you to probably go and enjoy your afternoons or your evenings, maybe even your mornings. Thank you so much for joining us, and a huge thanks to Ben. And we hope to see you again soon.
Happy to do that. Thanks.
Thanks, Ben. Bye-bye.